Hello and welcome to the best of the 10 with some of the best reports of the past 7 days. In this week's edition, 1 year on from Hurricane Katrina, our special correspondent meets the people still trying to rebuild their lives.
This is disgusting. This is heartbreaking. This is my story.
60 million and rising, Britain's record-breaking population. And seeing infrared, our environment correspondent reveals how our cities are heating up. 12 months ago, Hurricane Katrina hit America's Gulf Coast. 1,500 people lost their lives, and the cost of rebuilding reached nearly $100 billion. Our special correspondent Gavin Hewitt reported from New Orleans after the hurricane struck. This week, he went back for the 10 o'clock news to see how things had changed.
A year after Katrina, they are still tearing down properties, removing debris. In some areas, like the lower Ninth, families are only now gutting their houses, stripping the plaster, the mould. There is progress here, but painfully slow. Over 200,000 people have not returned to the city.
Only one is actually living in on this block.
So a year after Katrina, there's only one person
on this particular block.
A year ago, 85% of New Orleans flooded. Thousands were stranded with little food and water. And these people, some of America's poorest, felt abandoned. Today, some neighborhoods remain shells, deserted. Residents like Angela Dupar return, but only for a few hours. Almost no one is living here.
How can I live? There's nobody else on this block. Look at this. This is not fit for a dog. We're people. We are New Orleans. You know, how do they expect us to come back?
As we went inside her house, her sense of loss is raw and hurting.
This is disgusting. This is heartbreaking. This is my story.
For many people, this is now home, trailer parks. Over 70,000 live in trailers, families like the Kellys. It has been 12 months of struggle waiting for their house to be restored.
There is a lot of debris. My kids were sick from the debris. My husband got really sick and almost died at one point.
This is a typical suburban neighborhood where the water came over the houses. A year on, only 20% of the people have returned here. And you would expect there to be families here. In fact, just one has returned. And still on the street there are piles of debris like this from houses that have been gutted. New Orleans is clawing itself back, but full recovery may take 5 years. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, New Orleans.
On Thursday, it was announced that the population of the United Kingdom had risen above 60 million for the first time. Much of the increase, we're told, is down to migration. Well, our economics editor, Evan Davis, examined what that meant for us in the latest of our series, The Changing Face of Britain.
Here's an approximately 60 millionth inhabitant, Alicia. Welcome. We passed the psychologically important 50 million mark in 1948, but there was no comment here on the occasion of passing 60. Population growth has implications for everything from housing and public services to pensions. On today's figures, the last year's population growth partly came from 127,000 more births than deaths, but more significantly from net immigration. On this count, almost 250,000. More striking is the future. On the official projections, by 2031, it'll be 67 million of us living in Britain.
Immigration is now running at over 1/3 every year, and that means that we're adding the population of Birmingham, nearly 1 million, every 4 years. Is that sensible? Of course not. It's absolutely crazy, and the public know it.
On one view, you'd think, how can we fit more people, cars and houses into this country? England in particular. It's the 6th most densely populated country in the world if you exclude some of the smaller ones. But on another view, there's plenty of land, and you can fit almost 60 million people into an area the size of Heathrow Airport if you pack them next to each other. It's just about thinking about the land we have differently. For example, London is surprisingly low density. If it was as dense as Paris, you'd actually fit another 4 million people there. And space-wise, 3/4 of the British landmass is used for agriculture. Less than an eighth is urban. So in principle, you could double the population by merely giving up a sixth of the farmland. Not that anyone's recommending it.
It's a myth to think that we have to concrete over the countryside. Actually, we can accommodate an increase in population, but we can only do so effectively if we plan ahead.
The public might be sceptical that we will plan for all the extra people properly. But for the British, a sense of space is a valuable commodity. The more people there are, the more valuable it gets. Evan Davis, BBC News.
And as Britain becomes more crowded, a new study on global warming warns that big cities will experience more heat waves. Our environment correspondent David Shukman revealed new research to show how our built-up areas are heating up.
The world is warming, but it's the cities that'll heat up most, home to nearly half of humanity and most people in Britain. This is a thermal view of London, a heat picture of its buildings and its people. The whiter the image, the higher the temperatures. We filmed this a few days ago. Now temperatures are set to rise. Last month's heat wave was a taste of more to come. So what will life here be like in 50 or 80 years' time?
It's the sort of environment we would find very hostile. At street level, the temperatures will be really unbearable. You'll find people retreating into buildings, dependent on more and more air conditioning.
At night time, the cities of Europe stand out clearly, but they aren't just bright. The cities are also hot. Scientists call them islands of urban heat, and this has been measured. The cities can be 6 or 7 degrees warmer than the land around them. This was London in a heat wave. The city turned into an oven. For people inside it, this can be dangerous, even fatal.
During heatwave events, there is much higher mortality rates.
Professor Glenn McGregor of King's College London has led a major new study into the urban heat waves of the future. This research is designed to save lives. He's mapped where the city gets hottest and where the elderly are most at risk. We're the first to see this work, a plan to prevent global warming becoming lethal.
What we're trying to do is identify where sensitive people live within large cities such as London, Manchester, so on and so forth, so these people can be targeted with help during heatwave events.
This research isn't just for academic interest. In France 3 years ago, a heatwave claimed thousands of lives. The climate scientists say we'll get more conditions like this, which is why the results of the new study are being taken seriously.
It's affecting people now for certain. In 2003, when we had that heat wave across the whole of Europe, an extra 600 people, and was the norm, died in London, and we suspect that that was largely due to the temperatures. And we expect this to get worse in the future, however, and that's what we really want to address.
The problem is that the concrete used to build our cities absorbs heat in the daytime and then gives it off at night, causing those high temperatures, when what's most needed is vegetation, which is why here, 31 floors up at the top of the Barclays Bank headquarters, they've planted a green roof. It's one possible solution. The challenge, doing a lot more of this right across our major cities. Small changes to the urban landscape could make big differences. More trees to provide shade is an obvious option, but designing windows to keep out the sunlight would help, as would using different building materials.
Just as we've looked historically at how churches keep cool in summer, using those heavy materials in our rooms inside, as opposed to lightweight aluminium ceilings and so on, allows nighttime ventilation to cool the spaces off, ready for the next day.
So the decisions we take now in our urbanized world are crucial. What we build and how will shape our ability to cope with the warming to come. David Shukman, BBC News.
Probably the most extraordinary story of the past week emerged from Austria. It was the case of Natascha Kampusch, who'd vanished on her way to school when she was 10 years old. She was found 8 years later, having escaped her captor. James Robbins has the story.
Still kept from public gaze after 8 years as a captive, the 18-year-old has been reunited with her parents. Natascha Kampusch was only 10 when they last saw her. She disappeared on her way to school in 1998, causing national anguish in Austria. Natasha was found wandering about in a Vienna suburb, looking very pale, but apparently in good health. For Natasha's father, it's been overwhelming. After years searching, these were her first words to him when they were reunited.
Papa, I love you. That's what she kept saying.
This is where Natasha was held captive during those 8 lost years, in a tiny basement below the garage. She watched television, did chores inside the house, until for the first time she managed to slip out and outrun her captor. And this is the kidnapper, Wolfgang Pricklopil. Once he realised his crime had been revealed, last night he threw himself under a train in Vienna. Austrian police say Natasha may have developed Stockholm syndrome, building a partly positive relationship with her captor as a survival mechanism.
I think it's likely she'll be experiencing relief, joy at seeing her family, though a bit of abandonment because they didn't find her, and also some mourning at the loss of what is in a bizarre way a foster parent.
But as Natasha tries to adjust to the world she last saw 8 years ago, Austria is now asking, how could she have remained undiscovered for so long? James Robbins, BBC News.
The company behind a £6 billion revamp of the NHS computer system reported a huge financial loss on Friday. The iSoft Group said it lost nearly £400 million over the past year. The NHS computer project, one of the world's biggest, is 2 years behind schedule. Rory Catlin-Jones examined the story using what we might call a desktop experience.
It's an award-winning company which is right at the heart of the plan to move the National Health Service into the digital age. Now iSoft's lucrative contract has come back to haunt it. It's got a key role in turning the mountains of paper in the NHS into electronic form. But that work has fallen behind schedule and the company's in trouble over its accounting practices. That in turn casts a shadow over this whole ambitious project.
This company, remarkably, is involved in what is potentially the biggest stock market scandal for several years. And it's also, at the same time, involved in the biggest computer project in the world, with its role in the National Health Service computerisation programme. For that reason, the situation at this company is extremely serious, both in terms of its own shareholders and the wider public interest.
iSoft's share price tells the story. A year ago it was riding high on the assumption that the NHS work was very profitable. But in February the shares halved after iSoft admitted it would receive far less than expected. They sank further as it changed the way it worked out its profits and are now just 54 pence. It's unveiled a huge loss. It's under investigation by the Financial Services Authority, but its banks have agreed to keep it going. So, can the NHS now rely on iSoft? Some big hospitals have already lost patience with the delays. They've decided to opt out of the iSoft system, which was supposed to start arriving 2 years ago.
We're now in 2006 and they've still yet to deliver that new software, and all the signs are that there's further delays to come. So the question of can and will iSoft deliver, I think remains case unproven at this stage.
iSoft isn't the first company to struggle to deliver a government computer system, but this time there's more at stake than ever before. Rory Catlin-Jones, BBC News.
And that's it for this week. We'll be back with another edition of the Best of the 10 next week. Bye for now.